Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Motivation. I pray that you all are having a blessed week. I pray that everything is going well in your life. This morning, I wanted to talk about practice. And a long time ago, back in, I think maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a basketball player, Allen Iverson. And one of the things that he was an amazing basketball player, played for the Sixers. I'm a big Sixers fan. So he had some controversy because what was happening is he didn't want to go to practice. And there was this whole big, he did this interview and he just kept saying, practice? What about, we're talking about practice? And he thought that ultimately he was so good that he didn't have to go to practice. And people were making a big deal out of the fact that he wasn't going to practice, yet he was showing up for the games and scoring like so many points. He'd have what, 30, 40 point games. And so his thought was, why are y'all caught up in practice? Because practice is just practice. And he just kept saying, practice? Y'all talking about practice? And um, anyway, the moral of the story is this, is that I'm talking about practice today because of this. So yesterday, I was in a situation where I was spending some time with a pastor friend of mine. We were running an errand and he asked me a question, and the question isn't so important, but it was about the response. And he asked me, who am I listening to? Who have I been listening to lately for motivation? And so it was kind of, not a big, thought provoking question. But it made me think, and that's how we got to today's message. We're talking about practice, and um, so I know that there's a couple people that I've been listening to lately. I've been listening to a lot of Gary V or Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't know who he is, he's all over social media and he's talking about putting content out there and encouraging people to just do it. And instead of being hesitant, but just pressing the record button and putting your message out there and getting your message out to the world. And I really like his style and his way of motivating people. So him, as well as someone else I've been listening to lately, is Craig Groeschel. Craig Groeschel is a pastor of a church, a very large church, and they are the founders of the Bible app. So I've been listening to them. Craig Groeschel does a leadership podcast, which if you haven't listened to yet, I strongly recommend you go listen to it. Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. It is amazing. But anyway, so he asked me this question: who have you been listening to for motivation or inspiration lately? And so, the first person I said was, hey, I've been listening to Gary Vee. And then he went on to ask, what is it about him that attracts you to him? And I never really thought about it. My own simple thoughts, I think, motivational, message, his message is straight to the point. But in the process of me having to um, give a why for a reason for having why I listen to this person, it dawned on me that um, sometimes when we don't practice communicating in a particular way, we can get a little rusty. There we go. Get a little rusty. So, it's easy for someone. Now, I didn't have to give this big, elaborate, or eccentric answer, but I felt that I didn't want to sound dumb. Nobody wants to sound dumb, but didn't want to sound dumb. And I try to always be very basic, but I want to communicate my message clearly and effectively. And so in the midst of this, I was like, hey, he's a great motivational speaker. What he says is the truth. He's very straightforward to the point. But then I went on to say, because he wasn't familiar with this person, but I went on to say, give a little background about the person as well. And so after I got done with the first person, the follow-up question was, hey, anybody else? And I just been listening to Craig Groeschel's work, which I'm a huge fan of. And I said, hey, Craig Groeschel as well. And he's like, oh, I'm familiar with him. What is it that you like about him? And so by this time, I thought about my answer that I had for the first person. And I was like, you know what? I need to give a little bit more deeper of a thought here and communicate a more dynamic answer. And so I began talking about Craig Rochelle and what I liked about it and what it was about his style, what it was about his message. And in the midst, or afterwards, then we switched side and I asked him, hey, who are you following right now? And I looked back at the two answers I gave, one for the first one for Gary Vee and then the one for Craig Rochelle. And there was difference in how I articulated my answer. And so that's what leads me to today. Um, there was a time where right right as COVID was beginning, right before COVID, there was a time period in my after I retired. I had just retired, and for like the next couple months, or during that cycle of retiring, where I was kind of limited. We moved to a new area, and it was just my wife and I for the most part, and we were basically working from home all the time. And then all of a sudden, I had this bright idea. Let me teach a class, and so I went out to try and teach a class, which I've taught probably at least 50, 60 times before. I'm very familiar with the content. And I went out and tried to teach the class. I invited some friends that came out to the class. And what I noticed is I was stumbling over my words. I couldn't get my thoughts together. And also, the examples, the stories that I would use in the past, they weren't coming so readily. And I'm just like, man, what is going on here? And I felt got a little bit lost. And afterwards, my wife was like, are you okay? She's like, I've heard you teach this class before, and I saw that you were stumbling. What was going on? And I said to her, you know what it was? I haven't practiced it in a while. And so the reason I bring all of this up is because all day long we may be listening to audiobooks, or we may be listening to videos, we may be educating ourselves. Even we're going to go as far as to say, when we're in church, we're listening to a sermon and we're digesting all this information. Now, when it's time for us to use this information, say, for example, we just heard something and it's time to go out and apply it, we can do pretty well with that as far as the physical application. However, if we have to explain it or talk about it or share it with someone, if we're out of practice, having a deeper conversation, then we can struggle, and we can struggle with it, and then also we can be missing for words. And so that's why I believe that it's so important for us to practice. And let me be clear what I'm trying to say here. Not necessarily that you go hear a sermon and then you go out and try to deliver like a book report, verbal book report on it or something like that. What I mean is this, is that after you've heard something that's some information that you want to retain, what I want to encourage you to do is start, even if you have to talk to yourself. I do it in the car. Sometimes I talk to myself, but begin to speak it out. Begin to verbalize what exactly you just received, because one thing it will do, it'll help you with your memory. And two, you are practicing sharing that information, because all the time, I'm a big believer of this, is that sermon that you heard on Sunday wasn't necessarily for you, but it was for someone else. It was designed so that during that week, you would be able to share it with someone else, whether it's in your workplace, in your school, even in your home. But it's designed for you to be able to share. And if we're out of practice verbalizing things, and we are simply, now we may be able to text a million miles a minute, but when it comes to having a verbal conversation with someone, we may be out of practice. So taking some time to practice and being able to collect your thoughts and to precisely deliver a message is going to be very beneficial when it comes to your conversations, when it comes to sharing in all different aspects of your life, whether it's your work, your business, your school, your church, even your home life. So I'm encouraging you to practice verbalizing what it is that you receive, because it will help you. It will help you think better, It will help you be more effective in your communication, more efficient in your communication, and you will, because you're so excited that you should receive some information. I'll give you an example. I am listening to a book right now called The 5 Minute Rule, and it's not about dropping food on the floor and you got, I'm sorry, 5 second rule. And it's not about you drop food on the floor and you got 5 seconds to pick it up and eat it before it goes bad. No, not that 5 seconds, but it's about reprogramming your brain. When you have a thought, it's about acting on it. So typically we have a thought like, hey, I have this great idea, I want to go do this and this. And typically if we sit there, we'll forget the idea. We need to do some type of action immediately. So the 5 second rule is basically this, is that if you have this great idea, you just say to yourself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And after you hit 1, you take action on that. So it's something to kind of trick your brain into taking action on what you just heard. And you can do it for so many other things. You can do it to get rid of bad habits or anything. Anytime you have a bad habit go through your mind, you can 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and snap out of it. But anyway, so I was trying to explain this topic to my wife. I just heard this incredible book and I found myself searching for words, and I found myself not being able to express myself the way I wanted to because I had not practiced it. And so, what I want to encourage you to do, and I am going to take this advice myself, is that whenever I ingest anything into my system that I think is important, that I want to keep, that I want to be able to share with others, that I want to be able to use in my business, I'm going to practice verbalizing it so that I can communicate exactly what it is that I just learned. Because no one wants to be in a situation where someone asks you a question and you're not able to communicate effectively what it is that you want to share with the individual. And yesterday was just an example. I was with someone, once again, that I have the most respect for, and we don't go into deep conversations too often. But in this particular case, it just stood out to me that, hey, I'm not able to verbalize exactly how it is that I feel about this particular speaker or why you even listen to him. So to me, it was a wake up call that practice, practice is so important. Just like Allen Iverson would say, hey, practice. He needs practice. Everybody needs practice for whatever you are doing in life. If you're trying to perfect your craft, you need to practice. You need to practice. You need to practice. So what I want to encourage you to do is practice your craft so that you're ready for game day. When it's time to get in the game, you have already practiced and you're prepared and you're not stumbling. You're prepared and you're ready for action. So once again, thank you all so much for joining me this morning. I pray that you all are doing well, that you're blessed. And God willing, we will see you back here again tomorrow at 8 a.m. Thank you. And don't forget to practice. Take care and God bless.